And welcome back to Frankly Speaking. I'm your host, Frank. You know, it's interesting, guys. Been following this Elon Musk story and, his, I guess, willingness or attempt right now to buy out Twitter in an attempt to save free speech in America. Let's see here. I'm actually reading this on Twitter. A quote from Newsmax. Elon Musk has secured a $46.5 billion financing commitment to acquire Twitter and is considering starting a tender offer for its outstanding shares. A filing with U.S. regulators showed on Thursday. So he's getting the funds together. That's part of the story. Of course, the political left is flipping out over this because Twitter has been really a haven for leftists to get out their message while blocking the content of many conservatives. Including, remarkably enough, the silencing really of a sitting president of the United States and Donald J. Trump, which is quite remarkable when you talk about, what is considered by many in today's political, geopolitical atmosphere that the presidency is, the strongest position in the world right now, right? And yet a sitting president was silenced, blockade, really blocked out of the media during a campaign in many respects. And it shows you really the power of the mainstream media. And so in that sense, for my part here, while I've said it before, I'm not a purist on free speech. In this situation, I think we could definitely talk about how the political powers that be, or the media powers that be, blocking out Donald Trump in an attempt to help the far left candidate get into power is quite scandalous, without a doubt. I know that the left has used the ideas of bullying online as a means to shut out free speech, or at least to silence certain voices. And I'll be honest here with you, this has nothing to do with bullying. This has to do with controlling the narrative. This has to do with politics and power at the end of the day, and using the media ultimately to lift up the far left candidates. We know that, okay? We could talk about the nuances of free speech, but the bottom line is that's what America is. That's what we have here. I'm not a big favorite of the slander, the calumny, and the blasphemy, but at the same time, America is what America is, especially in regards to politics. Now, I find this interesting because I see the right really being in a conundrum here and in a very desperate situation. Now, again, I sympathize with the right in the sense that voices are being blocked, right? And it's not just Twitter, it's all social media, right? It's Facebook, it's, video channels, things like that. But it's interesting where we are in regards to American politics this day and age, because the right is turning, well, let me put it this way. In their reaction to the 2020 election and how so many voices were silenced by social media elites and powers in their attempt to get the far left candidate elected, you got a situation where you understand why the political right is upset, angry, and rightfully so. But at the same time, what is really the conservative solution here? Is it, okay, let's get this, rich guy here, Musk, to come, bail us out and essentially rescue the Constitution of the United States at the same time? Because what we've heard from the right since the 2020 election is that what we've seen in response to this social media blackout is that these are the fascistic corporations that have taken over America. This is fascism in America, right? And I find that interesting because, again, I think oftentimes in America, we like to throw words and narratives around that simply make no sense. Fascism has a deeper meaning in regards to his historical traits. If fascism is simply the power of corporations, well, then America has always been a fascist power. Then you go all the way back to turn of the Industrial Revolution in that respect, as corporations and really oligarchs have risen in America because now they've been able to block a social media campaign to affect an election. That doesn't change what we've had here. I think the other problem here is that the moment you start screaming fascism, 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 from the standpoint of the political right, and then you proclaim an oligarchical corporatist is going to be the savior of free speech in America. But that doesn't sit quite right with me, right? Because you're essentially having the corporatists come in to save the corporatist takeover of America. And at the end of the day, do you really even trust Elon Musk? Seems like a guy on the up and up oftentimes, but do we really know who he is? So do you see the conundrum here? On the one hand, the right's been screaming fascism, 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 and now you got an oligarch coming in to save free speech in America. I mean, am I gone crazy here that there's a problem here? And what do we know about Musk's intentions? I know he said that he wants to fight for free speech and maybe he opens it up a little bit, but we don't know what the intentions are by a lot of these people. And the fact that it takes, again, a corporatist to save a system supposedly taken over by fascism, that just seems strange. Because in many ways you could argue, okay, well, the right's turning to fascism in order to say fascism. What about that whole will of the people thing, right? I mean, the fact is that the problem with democracies, one of its greatest critiques has been that it always turns into an elitist system. It turns into an oligarchical system, right? That's the greatest critique of democracy. And this is kind of where we're at. I mean, to me, it's not a shock that, you know, we have all these powers in place. I mean, the fact that, you know, we've thrown most Americans into a usury employee-based economic system that's left us all in perpetual debt with low wages. Nobody owns property. Nobody owns the means of production. The vast majority of Americans are proverbial wage slave laborers at this point in time. And now the chickens are coming home to roost. The right's finally starting to figure this out, but there was many in the integralist camp making these arguments decades ago. Now we're here and nobody has an answer other than, okay, let's get the oligarch to come in and rescue, you know, basically what the oligarchs have taken over. Does that make any sense? Not to me. Again, I'm spitballing this because I'm really trying to figure out where the political right is right now. And I think we're seeing the whole premise of classical liberal politics really collapse at this point in history. So, but here we are now. Musk is ready to buy this thing out, or at least attempting to, and the right is kind of, okay, here comes our knight in shining armor to come to the rescue. And I'm like, but that's not how the Constitution is supposed to work, right? The will of the people is supposed to come in here, you know, whatever the will of the people means at this point in history, right? You know, it's like I've always said, my will's never been done in America. In fact, you know, through the concept of democracy and voting and representative republic, everything that I've ever loved and cherished and held sacred has been crushed in my lifetime. With a country that goes perpetually to the left, as I told you so many times before, has been going to the far left really since the founding, for the most part. And so here comes another conundrum now for the political right, who've had their, you know, their precious free speech shut down. And in this case, I would agree with them. That's the kind of free speech I think politically we all should have a right to. But the way we're going about it now and how there's no remedy for this, there's no remedy for the corporation that's taken over. See, it's funny to me because, you know, even with this Ukraine-Russia thing, right, we hear about the Russian oligarchs and how, you know, all over the world they're being shut down. Russian people of Russian descent that have money and are in the States and they're having their assets taken away. Fine, that's a governmental decision. I'm not here to judge that right now. But what I want to know is how come that word oligarch is not thrown around for big corporatists in America, right? We don't use that word. We use it for Russians, but we don't use it for Americans. When in fact, some of the biggest oligarchs in the world are here in America, ironically enough. And now we're turning to an oligarchy system to rescue us from the oligarchy system, ironically enough. So where do we go from here? I don't know. What does the right do with this? I don't know. I just think the right is desperate. I think a lot of us, including myself, see the writing on the wall. The nation is in a great state of peril, politically, culturally, socially. You know, you could argue it's all falling apart at this point in history. And if you're stuck in this left and right dichotomy kind of political debate, I guess this is a last gasp effort to save your ideology. But see, I think that's the problem with the right. I think the right doesn't realize that classical liberalism has been failing us now for a long time. And if you don't know anything else and you're stuck in the left and right dichotomy, where do you maneuver to? You keep doubling down on what you know. And that's what we see from the political right? Thump, 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 Constitution, thump, thump, thump. Okay, fine. But where has the trajectory of the nation ever changed to regulate back to the supposed right? It doesn't. We just got to get there and vote harder next time. Well, we've been doing it for a long time. You know, many Americans getting out there, doing what they can to change their country. And even when we get the political right in power, or the supposed political right, the country still goes to the left. I mean, this is a dog and pony show at this point in time, because the right continues to proverbially lose at every level. Even when they win, they actually lose. The culture, the political system continues to slant to the left. Now you want to blame fascism? I guess. I think historical fascism was defined a little bit different other than oligarchical control, but, you know, I mean, here we are. It's, you know, America's always been dominated by big corporations, and maybe it's taking them some time to finally go after the middle class and dwindle their ability to maneuver around. You know, like I said, maybe it's taking them some time, but they've done it through banking systems, the manipulation of money. Right, I've talked about it before, because the right has bought this thing about the economic engine of prosperity. Go out there, do what you can, art, trade, skill, climb up the corporate ladder, the economic engine of prosperity, make the money in America and you'll be happy. Well, I mean, listen, they took the land away from us, right? As we moved into a more industrialized nation, bankers came up with these loan concepts to keep us tied down. They called it the American dream, right? The house with the white picket fence, and all they did was tie us down with a bunch of debt. And now Americans don't own anything anymore, man. We don't. We got no land. Most of us don't even own our houses. We're tied to these perpetual, you know, sort of mortgage for the rest of our lives. And most of us live in small dwellings that are not really, have no functionality in our lives, right? They're just, you know, it's like one guy was saying, one commenter, the kind of homes we build in America today are not designed for people. They're not designed for family. They're designed for the banks, because the banks continue to churn over money, hand over fist, as they continue to resell the same homes constantly, as people have to refinance because wages have been low, the user system has tied us in, and guess what happens? You buy a house, you know, you're in there a few years, life goes wrong, medical bills, college, education, you got a leak on the roof, and all this stuff is expensive. Now you go remortgage the house, you take the money out, so you essentially never pay off the house. I mean, the only time really, for the most part, many Americans pay off their homes is oftentimes when they get an inheritance. But even that's dwindling, right? Yeah, some people sit there and pay it off, right? You got the Dave Ramsey of the world, you know, pay off your house first. It's fine. I'm sure some have. But my point is, housing is so overbloated, so overweight, so expensive now that, you know, most American families are really struggling just to survive. And a lot of it has been done by the corporations that the right continues to argue. Because, I mean, remember McCain-Feingold? And see, this is the interesting thing. It wasn't that long ago that the right was defending the corporations. Now they say they're at the fascistic takeover by the corporations, but they were defending the corporations 10, 15 years ago. Remember when McCain-Feingold came out? The bill that was going to limit how much money corporations could spend in elections. And trust me, I'm not a John McCain fan, but the right argued that the corporations, in the name of free speech, had the right to put out as much money into the political system, campaign ads, or whatever it is that they're buying to affect the political system, as much money as they wanted. And it was the right that kept saying, no, money is free speech, right? You know, here we are just a few years later, and now the right has a problem with corporations using their power. You know, what do you say to this at this point in time? The whole political argument for my time in the classical liberal camp was, remember, the right stood for the corporations, the left stood for the worker, right? And you got this kind of clash of ideologies between the workers and the corporations, and it was the right to represent the corporations, right? And here we are, all of a sudden now the right says, wait a minute, maybe the corporations are not on our side. You've had the corporations collude with the government. Is that fascism? I simply say that's the consolidation of power in a free market system, right? What do you do when the most powerful rise to the top and you establish no moral order at the top of our civilization? Because see, that's really the problem here, right? The money for the sake of making money, the money for the sake of making profits and comforts and pleasures with no moral order, because our founders never declared any moral truths, right? They left truth and religion and faith all abstract. You do you, I do me. And as long as we don't cross each other's property lines, we don't shoot each other. And see, the real problem is that lack of moral order that Americans have never had in their lives, where everybody gets to pick and choose their own personal moral codes. Well, that's transcended all the way to the top with the corporations, right? If you understood what true fascism was, particularly in Italy, where historian Charles Colomb, who's been on this show, has told us, well, true fascism only existed in Italy, right? There was always a moral order at the top. There's always a greater purpose at the top, right? In any fascistic system. And so in America, we don't have that. It's power for the sake of power. It's money for the sake of making money. That's what we've always had here. And that's why many of us have said, okay, well, what happens when all this is consolidated? I mean, look at all the land that's being gobbled up by oligarchs today, the farmlands today. Is anybody saying anything right now? No. Is the right saying anything about this? No, because you know what? That's freedom in America, baby. If you could buy up as much land as you want and then dictate your price or your demands, especially because it's farmland, that's America. That's freedom. Who are you to say no, right? What is the greater social moral position here that we're to take? Should the farmland belong to oligarchs? The land is not a how should I put this? You know, it's not a product that's created. It's given to us by God with the gifts of that it provides for us the needs to raise our families, whether it's a dwelling space or to grow food or to manufacture or to start a business. And what happens when these oligarchs, these elites, these corporations, these corporatists, what the right calls fascists, buy up all the land? Then what? See, there's always this problem with the right. It's this kind of struggle between freedom and what do we do what's right? Because at the end of the day, freedom doesn't dictate you have to do what is right. And because the right has never demanded a greater social order, that freedom is used to monopolize. That freedom is used to bring evil and to bring injustices into the world. And that's what we're seeing today. What's the right's answer for this? I mean, you know, some of these big name corporatists that are buying out all the land, the right sees it. They see it. But what can they do in the name of freedom? If he's got the money to buy out all this farmland and eventually demand his dictates, demand his prices, make his demands whatever they want, all these oligarchs, that's freedom, baby, in America. And this is what these corporations we're arguing about now that have, you know, cooped the American system in the name of a fascistic takeover. They did the same thing 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 years ago. But the right never had a problem 100 years ago, 50 years ago. They only have a problem now when they figured out that, guess what? We had an election hijacked from us. And guess what? The corporations and the governments have aligned together with one another. What's the answer to this problem? Especially because, again, we've never had really this idea that corporations and government could align with one another, right? Classical liberals taught us, guys like Limbaugh, Hannity, and all those guys for a long time, says that government and business are always going to be enemies. They're always going to be enemies. That's why we have one political party that stands for the worker, one political party that stands for the corporations. But where's the political party that said, wait a minute now? What happens if government and corporations align with each other? We don't have a political party, not a major political party that says this is the problem. No, because nobody saw this. I mean, the left never saw the problem because the left knew this was coming down the pipe, but the right never saw this coming. The right's been blindsided by this fascistic takeover by the corporations in America. Let's be honest. Now they're twiddling their thumbs like, okay, now we need an Elon Musk to come along and save free speech in America. Guys, tell me where I'm wrong here. I'm asking you guys, tell me where I'm wrong. Because I see nothing but a bunch of contradictions. And quite frankly, this is what I think. The political rights argument that this is a fascistic takeover of the system is nothing more than an excuse to cover for a classical liberal ideology that is completely lost, broken, and has no answers in America anymore, as America and the rest of the West, post-Enlightenment, heads to the communist left. Prove me wrong. Prove me wrong, ladies and gentlemen. That's all this is. Whenever you hear a D'Souza or a Glenn Beck talk about fascism in America, they're covering for their own ideology. It's been their ideology that has failed. It has been their ideology that has come up short in the system. Classical liberalism is falling apart right before our very eyes, because the natural fruition of classical liberalism is what? Those little demon seeds we call the progressives. It's been classical liberalism that has given us, ultimately, they put the principles in place for the devolution of a society that is now dominated by progressives. And what's the right answer to this? Get back to the Constitution. Get back to the Constitution. The Constitution's always been there. That's fine. I mean, I can respect some of the things in it, but where's the visible authority that says, okay, this is right, this is wrong? Where? The document itself can't protect us because there's no visible authority to enforce those things. And if you're going to tell me that we got three branches of government, the executive, the legislative, and the judicial system, they're political systems of the government itself. They're going to protect themselves. That's what they've always done. This is why the Supreme Court, doesn't matter how many Republicans you elect, how many decisions, seminal decisions, critical, big-time decisions, does the political right ever win at Supreme Court level? They lose practically every major decision, especially on social issues. That's why we're here. If you're going to depend on a bunch of political appointees to save you at the Supreme Court, you guys have lost your minds. I'm sorry. This is the full devolution of classical liberalism. We're living through it. It's not fascism. It's a devolution of classical liberalism, a broken ideology that betrayed Holy Mother Church, betrayed the faith, betrayed our ancestral roots, betrayed the 2,000-year analogy of the faith, betrayed everything that came before them because it was kiss my ass, I'll do what I want to do. Don't, you know what? Don't judge me for my sins. Sins don't exist because we call sins freedom in America. Let's be honest. Classical liberalism is falling apart. That's how I see this. I could be wrong. If somebody else has a better interpretation of this Elon Musk buyout, please, I'm all ears. Leave comments for me. But that's how I see this, right? There you go, ladies and gentlemen. This is Frank. I want to thank you for joining me once again. Sign off for Frankly Speaking. Good night, everybody.